No one anticipated it. Not the actors, not Rasheeda, and most definitely not VH1. It was scheduled to end with the drama that had just begun to settle between Jasmine, Kirk, and Rasheeda. The last blowout, the book's final chapter, which has already undergone too many revisions. However, the impending event was not noisy. There was no altercation or confessional at the beginning. It started with a single picture and a whisper. Like illegal goods, one still image was handed from hand to hand. Jasmine was the one holding it. She didn't, however, wave it around. She didn't yell. She wasn't even her mother. Voice. As if it were a formality, she pushed it over the table to Rasheeda after reaching into her purse as if to retrieve a receipt. However, it wasn't. It was paper-disguised betrayal. The face of a toddler gazed up from the smooth surface. He had a bashful smile, gentle curls, brown skin, and a gap between his teeth that made the room feel cold. The void, the recognizable Kirk Frost void, the ensuing hush was oppressive. There was only the sound of Rasheeda attempting to breathe through the fragments of her own heartbreak. No shouting, no response. She held the picture with shaking fingers. The face of a child she had never seen caught her attention. Jasmine was now claiming that the child wasn't hers. Not in a biological sense. She murmured, just above a whisper, "That's Zayden. I don't own him." Kirk's second child from a previous relationship is this one, and the reality snapped into sharp relief. The room's air became heavy, the kind that is too thick to cut through. Not with the truth. Not through denial. Rasheeda didn't let out a cry. She didn't demand proof or slap the table. She simply gazed as if her spirit had been expelled from her body. Jasmine then made things worse, or perhaps better. Taking out her phone, she pressed play on a voice memo. The voice of a woman filled the room. Calm, anxious, yet unmistakable. "Hello, Jasmine? This is something I've been meaning to express for some time. I believe you should know, even if I was unaware of you or Rasheeda at the time. I conducted a private DNA test. He is Kirk's 99. 9. Someone else did it." She had changed her name and voice to Maya, and she was no longer hidden. The show did not feature her. She was now a part of the truth, though. Rasheeda rose slowly, as if the earth had betrayed her. She responded, "No, you're not doing this to me again," but her voice was hardly coherent. "Never again." Jasmine stood up as well, shaky but determined. "I'm not going to drag you. He's been lying to all of us, so I'm exposing him." The door then slammed open as if it had been waiting for that moment. For the ideal time, Rasheeda's mother, Miss Charlene, barged in with her scarf tight, eyes wide, and a voice as keen as the Day of Judgment. "Another woman, another baby. Furthermore, this idiot didn't even have the courage to inform my daughter." That was the last straw. Rasheeda broke. "I'm not able to do this again, Mama. I sensed a problem. I simply didn't want it to be genuine, and the cameras continued to record." No production intervened. Since it was no longer reality TV, no one yelled cut. This was the leaking out of reality, and it happened quickly. A still frame of the picture had already been leaked to a gossip blog by one of the producers. The internet has its fangs in it in a matter of hours. Another secret child belongs to Kirk Frost. Again, Rasheeda was caught off guard. Miss Charlene exudes confidence. The headlines were self-explanatory. Even louder were the comments. "Put this man in jail. Why does Jasmine act like she's doing this all the time? For the sake of sisterhood? Rasheeda is overly composed." That entire set would have been overturned by me. However, the receipts continued to arrive. Screenshots of $750 wire transactions made to an LLC rather than a specific individual. And Maya's apartment complex was the exact location of that LLC. Kirk at a Shell petrol station, photographed. With the same gap-to-the-mouth grin, sunglasses down, the face was unmistakable as she hooted up, clutching a baby. Kirk had been caught, once more. Rasheeda seemed to be stuck in a time warp as she sat in her dressing room. She didn't hear her brand team gathering in the background, mumbling crisis plans. "How often?" she whispered. "How many times will he play me for crying out loud?" However, since this wasn't a brand issue, nobody responded. This was not even a problem with the show. It hurt. Old, unsightly, multi-layered agony that doesn't go away with a new wig and a photo session. For 2 days, the set was closed. Jasmine disappeared. Kirk vanished. Rasheeda and everyone else completely stopped answering. Just when the internet believed the reunion was over, it was in disarray. Jasmine's My Themuse's live notice appeared. The thousands tapped in as soon as it was up, followed by tens of thousands. Maya took a seat on a sofa. No glitz, toys behind her, unadulterated and genuine. She said, "I didn't want this. I had no desire to appear on the show. All I wanted was a peaceful upbringing for my son. However, I lost it when I watched Kirk on TV behaving like a transformed man and a devoted spouse." As Maya dropped the last bomb, Jasmine sat quietly next to her. She raised the 99 was stamped by the paternity test official. She played the audio after 9%. Kirk's voice was clear. "Keep Rasheeda in the dark. We'll look after the boy. Keep it low, please." Something in Rasheeda was broken by that voice and could never be fixed. From her bedroom, she silently watched the live event. She dropped her phone when she heard it. Another woman was being deceived by the same voice that had been deceiving her for years. It was no longer about forgiveness. It was a matter of survival. In the meantime, Kirk eventually came back. Through the eyes of the paparazzi, not with an apology or statement. TMZ wasted no time when they were caught exiting a lawyer's office with a hoodie on, face down, and eyes obscured. Following the second baby incident, Kirk Frost went into hiding. Once more, the timeline burst. However, Jasmine used a final dagger to end the live stream this time. "Even though I'm not proud of how I entered Rasheeda's life, I refuse to let another woman to go through what I went through," Maya added quietly but icily. He declared that he had had enough of drama. He was saying that he was done getting caught. The world of reality TV was collapsing, but something greater was subtly rumbling beneath the mayhem. A storm in a different business, lane or throne. This one had the same weight, even though it didn't involve infants or side chicks. Truth, revolution, and betrayal. A leak was the initial cause. An excerpt from Kendrick Lamar and Essa's performance. Strong but grainy. Only verses that are sharp enough to injure giants. No names, no direct shots. Initially, individuals believed it to be a vibe. A fragment then fell. She wore bars from blogs and a crown made of plastic. The internet gulped. Was Nicki Minaj the target of that? Was Drake the unseen presence behind the scenes? Was this thing for real? Like tectonic plates, the timeline started to separate. Rasheeda, broken and mute, was on one side. On the other hand, the truth is making the music industry shudder. Masquerading as poetry. The performance by Kendrick and SZA was leaked, but it wasn't a single incident. Rather, it was a warning shot and a loud earthquake. Legacy Dust was a statement rather than a song. Not a shade, everyone knew who the fire was intended at, but no names were given. It was removed from New Music Friday by Spotify. Apple Music discreetly removed it from its listing after identifying it as experimental performance art. YouTube began to increase fan uploads with few cautions about commercialization, but it was too late. The fire had spread. Line by line, fans were analyzing the lyrics. Bars were being transformed into mantras by creators, and the fuse was ignited by one post. "You're telling the truth when the machine is afraid of you." The response was electrifying on TikTok and Reddit. Instead of only hearing the bars, people sensed the beat of something more profound, a challenge, a summons, or an examination. The second explosion followed. A song called Fall from Grace was leaked. Kendrick didn't hold back this time. "I watched as applause caused the kingdom to fold. Created a throne out of inaction and faulty legislation." Cold as a knife, his words were clearly directed. But the foundation was rocked by SSS verse. "I never needed a ghost to write, despite being told I wouldn't survive without Papa. Way I'm feeling." The timeline jerked. Supporters let out a scream. Critics gave it high marks. There were a lot of theories. Was Drake the target of that? At both, Nicki? The army mobilized and the timeline broke. Nicki Minaj responded to Queen Radio with a fierce voice and a larger ego. "So we're simply acting like whispers can overthrow entire kingdoms. Right now. She lost her temper. The blueprint is me. The dynasty is me." She also released the unexpected song Crown Theft as evidence of this. It wasn't nuanced. Slice off the fabric. You are opposed to imitation. Only one queen exists. Examine the supper dish. The net was illuminated by barbs, causing timelines to be overrun with modifications, songs, and allegiance oaths, and sparking hashtags like Numbert Crown Theft. However, Kendrick did not reply with a CD. He sent a photo in response. A darkened one crown upside down, a long, empty dinner table, and a white photograph. Royalty ain't inherited. It's earned in silence. Earned in silence, was the caption. Sousa used a single dove emoji when reposting it. Just presence, strategic, nuanced, and deadly, no words. It wasn't a fight. Although it wasn't the war fans were accustomed to, this was war. Disproport was not the case. Something colder. It was a surgical procedure. Then came the leak that made all the difference. A folder on Discord connected to an enigmatic sound engineer. The files, internal documents, scripts, outlines, and one folder called GNX Closure Visual FAL are all carefully mapped into a 3-part visual rollout. Idols and Illusions Part 1. Ghost Crowns Part 2. What remains at the end of Part 3. The foundation of the industry was the direct target of each installment. The phrase closure appeared on the SSS website as a black screen countdown. Panic back at VH1 had a new face. Rasheeda was dark now. Her group was not answering. Kirk was not present. The plan for the reunion was falling apart, but unlike previous seasons, editing a fight wasn't the only thing involved. This was a battle for narrative control and perception. Rasheeda was also unwilling to give the network any more room to sell for the first time. She refused to cry in front of Q. Never again. Not for ratings. They had to work for the moment if they wanted it. This required recording the altercation in its unadulterated state. No story rewriting, no magic in the editing room, just the truth. Kirk, however, desired conditions. Just she and me, no crew, no producers. It was a request disguised as a trap. Rasheeda, however, had played the game before. On her terms, though, she consented. The rest of the globe was locked into something much larger while that was being negotiated and returned. The clock was running out. The murmurs became roars. The industry abruptly ceased acting as though it was unafraid. An emergency meeting was called by Universal Music. Internal documents known as the YMC Disruption Mitigation Protocol were exposed. It detailed strategies to fight the influence of Kendrick and SSS, including nostalgia ads, influencer launches, platform site takeovers, and, most importantly, a tribute night to Young Money. Planned 24 hours prior to the live webcast of the closure, the strategy seemed obvious. Take back the throne. Retell the story. Draw the audience away. However, the audience. Something had changed, so they weren't buying it. Anything basic? This was no longer about amusement. This had to do with freedom. This had to do with enough is being said by women, artists, and truth-tellers. Rasheeda also made her move in that same wave. She arrived to set. She was holding a manila folder with no glamour or retinue. Included are legal receipts, tax returns, and ownership transfers. Now silently, Frost Bistro was all hers. No declaration, only freedom recorded in print. When Kirk did show up, he was accompanied by 2 producers and a he appeared hollow, like a guy watching the walls of a lie-built fortress close in. He was a legal consultant. With his hood up and his face down, he sat down and attempted to talk. However, Rasheeda did it before him. You are no longer allowed to twist this. The edit, the story, and the damage control are not under your control. Not now. This time you listen while I speak. She didn't break her voice. It did not shudder. It sliced. It made the decision. It was redefined, and the last few minutes of the countdown passed while the cameras rolled outside the studio. There was no new gossip on the internet. Blogs these days. A dark screen with red numbers was being refreshed. Closing started at midnight on November 11th. Just silence. No music, no introduction. Next, faces, singers, dancers, ghost sessions, admirers, and unknown creators. They revealed their facts in whispers one by one. Exploitation, silence, repression, purchase, and sale. Then Sousa appeared, holding a mirror while standing barefoot in a studio. She merely gazed without saying anything or blinking. Kendrick then entered the frame. He answered, "We built this from pain." Not with platinum plaques or filters, but with scars. He displayed a ripped notepad with blood dried in the corners and lyrics scrawled on it. No kings or queens are needed in this industry. Accountability is required. The first song was released. Illusions and Idols. Unpolished, acoustic and raw. The internet wept, not just watched. Next, exploitation contracts, award show archival footage, ghost crowns, and polar-worshipping crowd yells, artist meltdowns, and transactions. The last act then came. At the end, what's left? The headlines turned to smoke. The charts disappeared. The crowns melted. A golden throne was reduced to ash in the last frame. One line was glowing, just the truth. No monarchs or queens. Below it, 111's, the demise of idols. The world had altered by sunrise. The music has to be read by streaming services. YouTube was unable to stop the uploads quickly enough. Closing the project wasn't a drop. A cultural explosion occurred. It was dubbed the most significant artistic event since Lemonade by critics. It was dubbed a revolution wrapped in rhythm by commentators. Additionally, In the View of Drake still hadn't answered this storm. Throne Reborn, a new song Nicki released, was overtaken by the wave. Her fans were conflicted as well. This isn't it, even if we adore you. While social media was still reeling, Rasheeda broke her silence with a viral comment that read, "The shift already happened in Atlanta. No confessional, no VHU, no confessional on a reunion stage, but accompanied by something more riskier, autonomy." She just put out one video. She was seated in her living room with no filters, no background music, and no artificial backdrops. Voice steady, ITY, camera. I leave at the end of this chapter. As a woman who ultimately made her own decision, not as a victim. She didn't cry. She didn't shade. Kirk's name was not even mentioned, but the message was obvious. She had finished acting out anguish. She declared a discreet relaunch under a new name, acknowledged complete control of Frost Bistro, Unbreakable unfollowed Kirk on all platforms without fanfare. Her silence now became more powerful than any argument because it wasn't petty, but rather about power. The internet quickly gained popularity. A tweet went viral in less than an hour. As C and Kendrick set fire to the throne, Rasheeda turned to leave Kirk. It's no accident. Cultural cleansing is what that is. It received more than 250,000 likes prior to breakfast. Support erupted in comment areas. We're tired of seeing queens lead fallen civilizations. The days of sobbing in makeup chairs are over. That same man doesn't even purchase diapers. The throne should burn. We're rebuilding something authentic. It was no longer merely a hip-hop and love event. It was emotion, and the world watched as an entire industry collapsed as Rasheeda closed one door, making the timing too perfect to be a coincidence. Closure was uplifting and contagious, not simply trendy. Independent musicians first revealing their personal tales of being ghosted, silenced, shelved, or stolen from producers or background vocalists. Former ANRS even came up publicly and anonymously, disclosing stolen credits, contracts, and concealed conditions. Proliferate like wildfire, start over algorithm. The movement. No more ghost rounds. Despite the confusion, it was evident that this was not cancel culture. Clarity culture was a cultural purification that was done not to destroy, but to clean. Rasheeda, who had previously been portrayed as a peaceful wife who was always forgiving, changed in that instant. A representation of freedom, not only of suffering. Her video was in the first 2 days it was reposted more than 3 million times. Everyone was spreading it. Even music theorists who had never seen a single episode of VH1 and feminist blogs and fan accounts. She was no longer only a cast member. She represented a movement, a visual representation of a more significant change. And the industry started to fear with each view and share. The standard methods were no longer effective. The rollouts of nostalgia failed. The influencer marketing strategies seemed phony. There was forced applauding during the tribute specials. The public, however, wasn't paying attention. They were paying attention. They had questions, serious questions. Who gets to use silence to create a legacy? Why do we continue to overlook guys who leave women bleeding in private? Why do we continue to overlook guys who leave women bleeding in private? camera in a public setting? Why are all women who voice their opinions seen as bitter, and those who remain silent are referred to as powerful? The music business wasn't prepared. VH1 wasn't prepared. Even Kirk, who had used charm and justifications to avoid penalties for years, was suddenly without a defense. Not in opposition to the evidence. Not in opposition to the vocal notes. Despite the fact that the woman who had previously shielded him on national television now stood towering, alone, and unbothered, yet at last free. It didn't end there either. Behind the scenes, the ripple grew. One of the main streaming platforms released a leaked document. Ghostwriting networks and unpaid authors were revealed by an internal request to check previous royalties upon closure. They rattled the labels. Silent lawsuits began to be filed. Legacy suddenly. Artists had to defend old songs, old contracts, and previous betrayals. Ziza and Kendrick remained silent in the middle of it all. Silence, no new tracks, no follow-ups, since they were aware that quiet does not equate to absence. Pressure was the cause. It was a plan. It was the sound of authority coming back to those who had never been heard. Drake reappeared, but without a disc. Rather, he shared a picture of a candle flickering next to a Grammy on Instagram, along with the statement, "Some things never change." The comments were harsh. Yes, like if you were avoiding smoke. Was that caption also written by the ghost? Nicki made one final attempt. One more unexpected song, the one with the title Throne PT2 was reborn. However, it was too late. Already the culture had changed. Even her most devoted followers had differing opinions. A few others applauded. Others pleaded with her to stop. "You are loved by us." But truth already won. "You can't remix closure," was one of the most popular comments. In the meantime, Rasheeda's rebrand was booming. In under 11 minutes, the merchandise drop for Unbreakable's launch sold out. No promotion for VH1. No support for networks. Like a woman who had at last cut her puppet strings with scissors, she started working along with nearby companies, quietly providing cash for a documentary about silent women in the industry. The same woman who had been made fun of for being silent was now the one turning up the volume on everyone, using her platform to amplify rather than to cry. Someone else's reality, and admirers started piecing everything together in the darkest recesses of the internet. They began referring to it as the era of reckoning, when the artists, the underappreciated, the reality stars, and the ghosted all began to speaking, and not by clapbacks or screaming bouts, but by deeds, exposure, and truth that didn't seek approval to be heard. As one admirer put it on Twitter, Rasheeda left a system that makes money off of women who break in quiet, not a man. As the month came to an end, another layer suddenly peeled back. Rasheeda did not appear, despite VH1 releasing a statement hinting to the most candid reunion in the franchise's history. She departed from them with film, facts, and suffering, but without her. She only wrote 6 words in her last post. "I did enough for you all. I'm finished." Just the truth without emoticons or hashtags. C, meanwhile, shared a picture from a peaceful studio across the nation. She is sitting on the floor with a pen in her notebook. There is no caption. In a single line, Kendrick reposted it. "We continue to write, but not for them." That was it. Explosions were not the end of the revolution. Pens moved silently as it came to a finish. With kings and women taking back their voices, queens refusing to plead for seats and tumbling off fake thrones. In a year when empires fell apart, crowns melted, and silence turned into a weapon and a cry of war. Autotune wasn't necessary for truth. It didn't require editing. There was no need for a filter. It only had to be believed. Because Rasheeda eventually turned to leave, Kendrick and the throne were burnt by SSAA, demonstrated that the loudest legacy is not with loudness, but with vision and silence at times. Quiet. Quiet.